When you talk about high-tech businesses and building high-tech businesses, Israel is not a place which is going to sell a lot of stuff to consumers, not a lot of stuff to the people in this room. It's going to be a place that solves a lot of problems for businesses. It's a solutions engine. Netanyahu was trying to give us a conception of the Israeli economy which is kind of curiously hardline and hip at the same time. But what he wasn't understanding, which for a former consultant at the Boston Consulting Group was kind of depressing, is that people who are building solutions for other companies have to have very deep, abiding relationships with those companies. You need to have access to the product development plans of companies. You need to be able to get references from other people you've worked with. And most important, you need to be able to tell them that, 2 years from now, when your solution is coming online, you are going to still be around. Now, Israel has had a lot of successes. I've chronicled them. I believe in them. I'm fascinated by them. A lot of successes in the process of globalization. But Israel needs rates of growth that are much higher than the things that Israeli politicians like to, chirp about, which is OECD averages. Oh, we're just about at where the OECD is. We're maybe a little higher. Israel has to have an economy like Singapore. It has to have tremendous growth rates because it is a country in which, and I can just tick these off, a fifth of its budget goes to the military. It only has a 56% participation rate in the economy because of the Haredi population, the marginalization of Israeli Arabs. Japan is 68%. Israel is 56% and declining. A third of Israel's children are under the poverty line. Its national debt is about 75 and growing, 75% of its GDP, which means that if it were invited to the European Union, if it could entertain the idea of entering the European Union, it actually wouldn't be permitted because 60% is the threshold for the Maastricht Treaty. And you can go on. And as a result, Israel's government is eating its seed corn right now. I happen to be married to a university professor, and I'm teaching at the Hebrew University. Everybody who knows Israeli education knows that as compared to 20 years ago, it is a disgrace. And the Israeli system is simply not creating for itself the engines that are going to bring it ahead 20 years from now. On the contrary, the fact that the algorithms that the kids learn in Shmona Matayim, are so much between their heads. Shmona Matayim is the famous unit of the Army which does basic computer software research. It's out of which Checkpoint Software and all of these other interesting startups started. The fact that these kids carry the stuff around with their heads is precisely why they're now living in Santa Clara. And we simply have to get it through our heads. We have to start carrying around in our heads an understanding that without peace, without integration as opposed to diplomatic isolation, Israel's high-tech businesses are going to wither on the vine. You cannot eat algorithms. One last point, because I think it's often misunderstood. We get a little glib about this thing when we talk about this two-state solution. I remember Tom Friedman about, 10 years ago, started talking, or even 15 years ago, started talking about the necessity of Jews and Arabs, Palestinians and Israelis, to get a divorce. And this has been a kind of conceit of the conversation ever since. Dysfunctional family, we need a divorce. No. No. Palestine and Israel together will be nodes in a global network, and they will be nodes in a regional network. And what we need to start talking about is integration. If you start ticking off all the jurisdictions that states have for the purpose of creating an economy, bandwidth, telecommunications bandwidth, water resources, currency, labor migration, airspace, healthcare and disease control, roads and bridges, also defense, there's no jurisdiction that the state of Israel is going to be able to exercise in the future without a very deep cooperation with the Palestinian state and Jordan. So we start talking about a two-state solution. Obviously, both sides are trying to preserve, for absolutely great reasons, are trying to preserve the poignancy of the national cultural life and are trying to preserve distinction through political apparatus. Obviously, that's the reason for a two-state solution when all other reasons fall away. But a two-state solution is really a three-state solution. Common market with Jordan. It's really a 20-state solution because it means developing a relationship with the countries of the Mediterranean through a Sarkozy-like European Union. We have to begin to understand that Israel is not a nation that dwells alone.
Thank you, Bernard.
During the year of 2000, during 12 months, since October backward, we lost only one Israeli citizen as a result of terror. This was the most peaceful year that we knew since we conquered or liberated the West Bank. How could we do it? Some people will tell you that it was the Shin Bet. Well, I was a director, and I'm telling you that not quite. If you will ask Bibi Netanyahu, he will tell you that it was him as a prime minister. And if you will ask Ehud Barak, he will tell you that it was him as a prime minister. Well, the truth is somewhere else. We analyzed it every month. And we came to a very, very strange, to me, lessons. By the way, when I found out, I remember I gave a lecture and I came back home and I told my wife that I have the solution. And she said, well, I know it for the last 40 years. And I told her, first of all, for military people, it takes more time to understand. And second, you know it, but I see it happening. We live it. And this is the lesson. We saw a very interesting correlation between, in a way, three factors. One is hope, or in other words, the support of the Palestinian street in the peace process, which influenced, first, the terror policy executed by Hamas, and second, the security policy executed by Palestinian Authority, or in this, in other words, the security organizations of the Palestinians. And I want to explain you. The support of the Palestinian street in the peace process was measured every month. For me, it was a very, very important source of intelligence. By the way, most of the polls were made by Halil Shkaki, Dr. Halil Shkaki, we became very good friends after I left the Shin Bet. And when I told him that his polls were a very good source of intelligence, of course, I'm not sure he liked it. But anyhow, Palestinians want something very simple. They want to see the end of Israeli occupation. They call it Palestinian freedom. They want to have better education, better economy, etc., etc. And if they believe that they will get it using diplomacy, which means peace process, they will be against terror. So, the higher was the support of the Palestinian street in the peace process, Hamas used less terror. And a word about Hamas. We have to understand, we see Hamas as a terror organization. And it is. Hamas is a terror organization, but it is not only a terror organization. They have Azadin al-Qassam, yes, the military wing. But Hamas is an ideology. They have a political wing, charity, education, etc. Hamas is an alternative to diplomacy. If Palestinians do not believe in peace process because they do not see a viable peace process, they will support Hamas. By the way, Sheikh Yassin, every meeting when he discussed terror policy, he asked his people what the imams in the mosques will say. What will be their reaction? Because the imams are the connection between the people in the street and Hamas organization. And they reduced the attempts to use terror if Palestinians do not support it because they supported the peace process. And in addition, on top of it, I used to meet Jibril Rajoub, Mohammed Ahlan, and Amin al-Hindi every day, the heads of the Palestinian security organizations. And they used to tell me, listen, we are not your collaborators. We are fighting Hamas not because you are giving us an order. You will not. You are not paying our salary. We are doing it because we feel that in the end of the road, we shall have our freedom, end of occupation, etc., etc. The moment that we shall not feel it, forget about it. And we have to understand, as long as they are fighting Hamas, at that time, by the way, there were more Hamas activists in Palestinian jail than in our jails. We cooperated. We shared information. We executed operations together. We fought Hamas together. As long as we are fighting together Hamas, and in parallel, there is a peace process, a viable peace process, they are perceived among their people as freedom fighters. If there is no peace process in parallel, they are perceived as Israeli collaborators. And they will not be Israeli collaborators. And in a way, this is the whole lesson, in a nutshell. Security for us means hope for the Palestinians.
Thank you, Amin.
The answer to the why two-state solution now is very simple. Because of the alternative. If we will not reach a solution based on two-state solution, the end will be very soon. It will be one-state solution, and that's mean the end of Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state. These are the alternative. And when somebody is saying that he wants a two-state solution, but he is in favor of status quo, he is not in a hurry, it's mean that the one-state solution is behind the corner. September 1st, this year, between the sea and the Jordan River, more Palestinian student pupils starred the A grade than Jewish one. This fact is very clear. That means in 5, 10 years from now, it will be a clear majority of Palestinians between the sea and the Jordan River. That means it will be in Greater Israel a Palestinian majority. And then, and this is a major trend now among the Palestinians, they will come to the Capitol Hill, maybe to J Street when you celebrate 10 years from now, a decade of Congress. And they will say, very simple, we are against terrorism. We want to live together with Israel, not side by side, but together with each other. We want one person, one vote. Mandela, when he demanded, he was praised by everybody, especially here. What will be the answer? Why not? So, if you're really a Zionist, your main concern is that to create the two-state solution. It's meant to bring, it's more than that. The two-state solution is a wonderful solution, but the most important solution for the existence of Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state is the end of the occupation. If we will not bring the end of the occupation will bring the end of the state of Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state. This is all the truth of the present situation. And therefore, the major enemy of the state of Israel is the status quo situation. This is the major one. When Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, I pay my dues when I spoke in Bar Ilan, now President Abbas, Abu Mazen, this is his turn. Okay, wonderful. And if he will not respond, wonderful, status quo. Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, I demand that the Palestinian will recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Great. And if not, no peace, nothing, status quo. But status quo is not the enemy of the Palestinian. Status quo is the enemy of the Jewish state. This is the problem. Because the Palestinian has two options. They have the option of two-state solution, but they have also the option of one-state solution. We have only one option, a two-state solution, because if we want to maintain Israel as a Jewish and a democratic state, we cannot annex de facto, and that's what we are doing, de facto, the territories and 3 million people that are living there. That's we can't do. Because of an Israeli interest, because of a Zionist interest. Not because President Obama is asking us, not because the Arabs are pressuring us, or because the Palestinians are threatening us. This is not the situation. This is our own motivation. So, what we have to do is to make clear, first of all, to ourselves, not to the international community, not to the international community, neither to the Palestinian and Arab war, to ourselves, that we will not remain in the occupied territories. And we will do our best to maintain Israel Jewish and democratic.
And that's where I come to the second point that Mel raised, and that was Yitzhak Rabin and his commitment to achieve peace. We are next week going to remember him yet again on the 14th anniversary of his assassination. And it's worthwhile taking a moment to think back 14 years to a moment before his assassination when the peace process was in its high phase, highest phase, I would say. When Yitzhak Rabin came to Washington to sign the Oslo II Accords with Yasser Arafat, it was September of 1995. Hosni Mubarak, who didn't show up for the first signing ceremony in 1993, turned up then, as did King Hussein of Jordan, as did the Saudi foreign minister. And this was a recognition on the part of the Arab states that peace was really possible. Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat joined a reception that night. I dare say you were there, Mel, the Corcoran Gallery, with Arab Americans and American Jewish leaders. And I'm not sure that J Street's leadership was there, probably hadn't been born yet. And they gave impromptu speeches, and Yasser Arafat, not required anymore to read the mantra that his aides prepared for him, gave a very good speech about the need for peace with his Israeli cousins. And Rabin got up and said, "You know, Mr. Chairman, we Jews are not very good at sports, but there's one sport in which we are Olympic champions, and that's speech making. And it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that you are a little bit Jewish." To which Arafat responded with that big shit-eating grin of his. He said, "Yes, yes, 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 Rachel is my aunt." Now, how he figured out that Rachel was his aunt, Rachel the matriarch, of course, was his aunt, is unfathomable, but that was just one of the many unfathomable things about Yasser Arafat. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that that night, Yitzhak Rabin, for the first time, spoke about the need for a Palestinian state. It may surprise you to know that he had not up until that time endorsed a Palestinian state. It's not in the Oslo Accords. And yet he endorsed it and explained it in these memorable words. He said, "What we need is separation. Your people and my people, we need separation, not out of hatred, but out of respect." And that was Yitzhak Rabin's vision, and that was his purpose in trying to resolve the conflict with the Palestinians. Two states built out of respect, not out of hatred. And the tragedy, the immense tragedy for the Palestinians and for the Israelis, is that the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin turned that process of separation out of respect into a process of separation out of hatred. And our challenge, and in particular the challenge of American diplomacy, is to restore the respect. Not an easy task. For 7 years after Clinton's President Clinton's efforts to try to establish a Palestinian state alongside Israel, after those efforts ended in failure, the Bush administration walked away from the process. This, for me, was a compounding of the tragedy that began with Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. For in the process of walking away and allowing the Israelis and Palestinians to have at it, not giving them a diplomatic alternative, thousands were killed, Palestinians and Israelis. And the whole edifice of peacemaking that had been constructed from Henry Kissinger on to Bill Clinton was destroyed in those days, especially the trust and the respect between the two peoples. It was therefore somewhat baffling to me that 2 years ago in Jerusalem at the Saban Forum, which I have the burden of organizing every year, Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State at the time, stood up in Jerusalem and said that it was a national interest of the United States to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict by establishing an independent Palestinian state alongside a secure Israel. The national interest of the United States, she said. Nobody paid a lot of attention to that statement. I'm not sure why, probably because there wasn't a lot of credibility in the Bush administration's efforts at the end of its term to try to pick up the pieces and make a push towards resolving the conflict. But the declaration of a national interest has profound meaning. It means that the United States considers that this is something that is important to us, not just to Israel, not just to the Arabs, not just to the Palestinians, that it's in our national interest. I gather you heard it today from General Jones. He said that if he had one thing that he would tell the president, it was this problem needed to be fixed. This problem needed to be a priority. Of all of the issues in American foreign policy, why would President Obama's national security advisor say that? Except that it is now recognized by Democrat and Republican administrations alike that it is in our national interest to do so. Why? I think partly because we do care about Israel's survival and well-being. And viewed from Washington, the greatest threat to Israel's survival and well-being today comes from the failure to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that's in our national interest, to ensure Israel's survival and well-being. Beyond that, we have a national interest in the security of our Arab allies. And those regimes now find themselves deeply threatened by the failure to resolve this conflict. Why? Because Iran, backing Hezbollah and Hamas, are able to exploit the failure to resolve the conflict to promote a potent message to the Arab street. That message is that violence and terrorism works, that's the way to liberate Palestine, that negotiations and reconciliation and compromise leads to nothing. Hamas can stand up and say, through violence and terror, we got rid of all of the settlements in Gaza, and you, Abu Mazen, have negotiated with Israel for 16 years, and all you got was an expansion of settlements and nothing else to show for it. So violence and terrorism works. That is a very dangerous message. It's a message which has resulted in Ahmadinejad and Nasrallah and Khalid Mashal being more popular in many parts of the Arab world than the Arab leaders themselves. So in order to reverse this message, we have to find a way to show that peace and reconciliation works. And finally, America's own standing in the Arab and Muslim world is affected when we fail to demonstrate that we can help to resolve this conflict. You know, and I don't need to belabor it, that the Palestinian issue is the hot button issue in the Arab and Muslim world because it is symbolic of the humiliation that they feel that they have suffered at the hands of the West over so many centuries. And therefore, the effort to resolve the Palestinian conflict can make a serious difference in terms of our promoting American interests in the broader Arab and Muslim worlds. So that's why it's a national interest of the United States. And that's why when you stand up and support the two-state solution, you are doing so in support of the American national interest. Thank you very much.
I'd like to also congratulate J Street's Executive Director, Jeremy Ben-Ami, and the rest of the staff on this impressive conference in J Street's first year of existence. I'm honored to represent President Obama at the first National J Street Conference, and you can be sure that this administration will be represented at all other future J Street conferences as well. And speaking of the streets in Washington, I'm reminded that the Secretary of Defense, who's a good friend of mine and has a great sense of humor, defined Washington as that rarest of cities where people still stroll down Lover's Lane holding their own hands. Except on J Street. Ladies and gentlemen, for more than 6 decades, the abiding friendship between the United States and Israel and our people has been based on a deep foundation of common interests and values, shared experiences, and deep cultural and personal ties. Indeed, it is a relationship founded as much on the personal experience as it is on geopolitics. Through countless interactions with Israelis in government, the military, and private life, I have been blessed with many Israeli friends and colleagues. My own exposure to Israel came as a young Marine when I trained, a younger Marine, when I trained there in the 1990s. I came away amazed by not only the hospitality and resilience of the Israeli people, the professionalism of the IDF, where I have many friends today, and later on in my career, including my last job on active duty as a Marine, as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, a position in which I was responsible for overseeing military-to-military relations between the US and Israel. I developed a deep understanding of Israel's security concerns, both strategic and tactical, and it was with this in mind that I approached my work last year, trying to help with the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians as Special Envoy for Middle East Regional Security in the previous administration. And despite that, this administration asked me to serve as National Security Advisor, so no hard feelings. Despite the challenges and frustrations we encountered last year in the pursuit of peace, there were many moments of great satisfaction. And my work last year was some of the most professionally rewarding and personally fulfilling in my life. To see Israelis and Palestinians seriously engaged in finding a solution to their conflict, to see Jenin, a city formerly overrun with terrorists and criminals, reborn as a city in which people could walk the streets safely and shops were humming with business, was truly an amazing experience. And both sides deserve a lot of credit for making that happen. And now, as President Obama's National Security Advisor, and with the benefit of this accumulated experience, I'm here to tell you, without equivocation, that Israel's security and peace in the Middle East are inseparable. Thank you. As I learned last year, neither can exist without the other, and only a two-state solution can provide the lasting security and dignity and future for both Israelis and Palestinians, and the people of both sides deserve nothing but the best as we strive to give this to them. But time is not necessarily on our side. The imperative for peace is now. So let me be very clear. America's commitment to Israel's security is not just a slogan, not just something we sign up to easily, but rather a pillar of our foreign policy. Time and again, the United States has given meaning to this commitment by working to advance regional stability, by standing up for Israel's right to self-defense, and by pursuing peace between Israel and her neighbors. Under President Obama, this commitment to Israel and to peace is as strong as ever, as is our coordination with the Israeli government in the face of the many challenges we both face in the region. I might just say that of all the problems the administration faces globally, that if there was one problem that I would recommend to the president, that if he could do anything he wanted just to solve one problem, this would be it. Finding a solution to this problem has ripples that echo, that would run globally and affect many other problems that we face elsewhere in the globe. The reverse is not true. This is the epicenter, and this is where we should focus our efforts, and I'm delighted that this administration is doing so with such enthusiasm and commitment, and I hope that it will bear the fruits of that labor will be visible in the near future.